There's no denying that DreamWorks has given us some iconic villains, but not all of them are created equal. Some are absolute masterminds, and others, well, not so bright. So today, we're breaking down the smartest and dumbest villains DreamWorks has ever created. Starting with Lord Shen from Kung Fu Panda.
Part of you here, part of you there, and part of you way over there, staining the wall.
Easily one of the most strategically intelligent villains in any animated movie. Because this guy took something as simple as fireworks and turned it into a weapon of mass destruction. What makes him different from other DreamWorks villains isn't just that he built a weapon, it's what that weapon represents. Shen understood something most villains don't. He realized that no matter how strong he became, he couldn't win by playing the same game as the greatest Kung Fu masters. And in a world where Kung Fu had ruled China for centuries, where warriors and philosophies were built around it, that realization changed everything. So instead of trying to beat Kung Fu, he made it irrelevant. His cannons didn't just make him stronger, they changed the whole system. Suddenly, years of training and mastery meant almost nothing against explosive weapons. In one move, Shen made it nearly impossible for anyone to resist. He didn't rush it. After being exiled, Shen chose to play the long game. He spent years in hiding, building, and planning. Step by step, he created a powerful fleet to carry out his vision. He waited until he had overwhelming force, that level of patience, that strategy. When he finally returns, it shows. The fleet isn't just for intimidation, it's proof. Proof that Shen planned everything carefully and that he wasn't just driven by revenge, he came prepared. Because of that, he comes incredibly close to winning. His cannons defeat Kung Fu masters, his army takes control. The city falls under his rule. His plan works almost exactly the way he intended. If this were almost any other story, Shen would have won. And the only reason he was defeated, despite all his intelligence, was himself. The fear of the prophecy, the need to control his fate, that obsession becomes bigger than his strategy. He built a near perfect machine, but he couldn't control himself. That's what destroys him. Not Po or Kung Fu, but his own actions. Just like Jack Horner from Puss in Boots.
Well, you know what they say. Can't bake a pie without losing a dozen men.
But without a plan. Because just like Shen, Jack had resources. He built an entire empire from his pie business, and on top of that, he somehow collected one of the most insane arsenals of magical artifacts. We're talking about a literal magic nanny bag. And what does he do with all of it? Nothing that resembles a smart plan. See, the thing about Jack is, he's not dumb because he lacks information. He's dumb because he never learned to think strategically. Sure, he had the goal of getting the map, reaching the wishing star, and controlling all magic. Everything in between, that's just chaos. Instead of strategy, everything he does is driven by greed. He doesn't plan anything. He just grabs the nearest magical object and hopes it solves his problem. He treats every artifact like a toy, with zero planning. Throughout the movie, you can see this over and over again. He even treats his own men like disposable objects, literally using them as a human bridge for his carriage.
Flex the glutes, I need a solid surface.
Which is insane, because those are the same people he needs to win. So instead of building a strong team or forming alliances, he isolates himself completely. That's the biggest difference between someone like Shen and Jack. Shen uses fear, manipulation, and long-term planning to control people. Jack doesn't even bother. His entire life, brute force and power have always worked for him. So he never develops strategy, discipline, or restraint. And that becomes his biggest weakness. When things start falling apart, he has nothing to fall back on. And in the end, that's exactly why he was consumed by the very magic he tried to hoard. If he had just used his brain for 5 minutes, instead of killing his own men, misusing his artifacts, and rushing in without a plan, he might have had a real chance. But he didn't. Now compare that to Galaxar from Monsters vs. Aliens.
My days of running and hiding are over.
Someone who builds everything around precision and planning, and was already 10 steps ahead before the movie even started. His entire plan begins long before we ever see him on screen. He already knows about Quantonium and exactly how to find it. Instead of rushing in blindly like most villains, Galaxar sends out a highly advanced probe to scan planets, identify the target, and retrieve the resource efficiently. What really makes Galaxar smart is that he doesn't rely on just one move. When the probe gets destroyed by the monsters, he doesn't hesitate. He escalates and steps in personally. When he finally arrives, we see why. Galaxar isn't just trying to steal Quantonium, he's trying to use it to power a cloning machine that can create an entire army of himself. And yeah, the clone idea sounds simple at first, but it's actually extremely effective. Instead of relying on soldiers who could fail or betray him, he creates an army designed to follow his command. It's efficient, scalable, and completely under his control. Even if the clones aren't perfect, they're more than enough to overwhelm Earth through sheer sheer numbers, and it works. He captures Genormica, he extracts the Quantonium, and he builds the army. At that point, Galaxar has basically already won. That's what defines his intelligence. He doesn't rely on brute strength, he relies on technology, planning, and control. Not to forget, he literally destroyed his own home planet because he couldn't tolerate his own people, which shows he doesn't just deal with problems, he eliminates them completely if they get in his way. But in the end, that same mindset becomes his weakness because Galaxar is so focused on control that he underestimates the one thing he can't fully control: unpredictability. When the monsters don't fight the way he expects, they break his system. Eventually, his own ship is pushed into self-destruct, taking him and his entire operation down with it. He makes the classic mistake of thinking everything can be calculated, something that was never a problem for our next alien invader, Captain Smek from Home.
We are definitely not doomed.
And we're out.
We are doomed!
Who never really had a plan to begin with. Now, I know Smek isn't supposed to be taken seriously. The movie clearly plays him as a joke, a loud, overconfident buffoon. And honestly, I'm not here to judge him like he's some pure evil war strategist. But even within that context, this guy might be one of the most unintentionally disastrous leaders DreamWorks has ever made. For those who don't know, Captain Smek is the leader of the Boov, a species that has spent its entire existence running away from a terrifying enemy called the Gorg. Smek's entire leadership philosophy is to keep everyone scared enough, so they never question him. The craziest part is the Boov aren't just victims of bad luck, their entire situation is his fault. During a peace meeting with the Gorg, Smek panics, grabs what he thinks is a powerful artifact, and runs away with it. Not as part of a master plan or anything, he just takes it, runs, and calls it a win. That one decision starts a full-on war. The artifact actually turns out to be a Gorg egg, and from that moment on, the Gorg begin hunting the Boov across the galaxy. Instead of fixing the situation, Smek turns it into his entire identity. He parades the object around like a trophy while his species is forced into a never-ending cycle of running and hiding. Keep in mind, he has this thing for years. He never truly questions what it is, the very reason his species is being hunted. He just holds it and keeps running. Not to forget, Smek's ongoing solution to all their problems is to relocate his entire species and take over another planet, which itself is unbelievably fragile, because all it takes is one mistake. When O accidentally sends out a party invitation to literally everyone in the galaxy, they almost lose their cover. Just like that, Smek's genius plan is on the verge of collapse. That's what defines Smek as a dumb villain. It's not just that he makes bad choices, it's that every major problem he faces is something he created himself. But unlike him, Fairy Godmother from Shrek plans everything in advance.
I do believe we can make this work to our advantage.
She's not just some magical side character who shows up with a wand, sings songs, and spends half the movie trying to gaslight an ogre out of his own marriage. Because when you look at what she built, how she operates, how close she came to winning, you realize she's one of the most strategically dangerous villains DreamWorks has ever written. Long before Shrek 2, she had already built influence and power in the kingdom. This woman literally built a potion empire. Factories, workers, mass production, branding. She turned magic into a business. In the kingdom of Far, Far Away, if anyone wants a happily ever after, she's one of the people they go to. And that right there is genius, because she doesn't control people directly. She influences what they want. That's where her long-term thinking really starts to show. In the past, she helped King Harold achieve his happily ever after, turning him into a human. And that left him deeply in her debt. Years later, she uses that favor to straight up blackmail him into letting Fiona marry her son, which shows just how calculated she is. She doesn't just want power, she's trying to secure a future where her own bloodline sits on the throne. Then Shrek shows up and completely messes everything up. Still, she doesn't try to attack Shrek physically or destroy him outright. Instead, she goes straight for his mind. She identifies his deepest fear and preys on his insecurities. And she's able to successfully convince him that he's ruining Fiona's life, that he doesn't belong in her world. By the time she's done with him, Shrek is so insecure, he almost gives up on his own marriage. At the same time, she's working behind the scenes, manipulating the royal family, pressuring the king, and setting up Charming to take Shrek's place, all while keeping her public image spotless. She never relies on just one method. She mixes influence, emotional manipulation, and deception into one coordinated plan. That's exactly why she stands as one of the smartest villains DreamWorks has ever created. The complete opposite of her own son, Prince Charming, who might be one of the dumbest.
He will rue the very day he stole my kingdom from me!
Prince Charming was basically handed everything. His entire life, his mother, the fairy godmother, was the one pulling the strings. She had the brains, the magic, and the plan. All Charming had to do was play his role. Even that was too much. In Shrek 2, the plan was simple. The fairy godmother sets up this whole scheme where Charming just has to pretend to be Shrek and win Fiona over at the ball. She literally does 90% of the work for him. All he had to do was not be himself.
Is that glitter on your lips?
Cherry flavored. Want a taste?
And he still couldn't do it. He lacks even the most basic deception skills. This is one of the easiest setups possible. Everything carefully planned, everything in his favor, and he still fumbles it. Then we get to Shrek the Third, where things somehow get even worse. Now Charming is on his own without his mother, and instead of learning anything from his previous failure, he doubles down on being incompetent. Yes, he manages to gather a group of villains and even take control for a moment, but what does he do with that power? He turns the whole thing into a dramatic stage performance. Instead of ending things quickly and efficiently, he sets up this theatrical execution, rehearses lines, and acts like he's the star of some fantasy Broadway show. That's where his biggest flaw really shows. He doesn't care about winning. He only cares about looking like he's winning. So instead of ending things quickly, he keeps delaying everything, giving Shrek and his friends all the time they need to escape and fight back. For someone who acts this confident, you'd expect some skill, but Charming even struggles against unarmed opponents. Like seriously, how do you miss a hit from that close? At this point, it's not even bad luck, it's just pure incompetence. And that's what makes Prince Charming such a perfect dumb villain. He has the confidence, the ego, and the spotlight, but no awareness or execution. Unlike Charming, Grimmel the Grizzly from How to Train Your Dragon relies on no one but himself.
I'm afraid you're mistaken. You've never seen anything like me.
Grimmel is the kind of villain who doesn't need an army because he is the threat. He's the guy who hunted Night Furies to near extinction, something no one else has ever done. And he didn't do it with brute force or massive armies like Drago Bloodfist. He did it with knowledge. That alone tells you how dangerous he really is. He understands their biology, their behavior, how they think, how they move. He basically treats them like a science project. Because of that, he's always one step ahead of both dragons and their protectors. So when the Burkians flee their home, Grimmel doesn't just randomly find them. He tracks them down through strategy, observation, and his deep understanding of how dragons behave and where they would go. Then he takes it even further. Grimmel already understands enough about Night Fury behavior to exploit it. He uses the Light Fury as bait, knowing exactly how Toothless will react, and builds his entire plan around that single weakness. And it doesn't stop there. He takes control to a whole different level by developing chemical methods using dragon venom to strip dragons of their free will. Once they're under his control, they're not just loyal, they're completely obedient. Now, combine that with his experience, he has spent years studying his enemies so well that he knows their next move before they even make it. So when the heroes try to trap him, it doesn't work. He sees it coming. Because this isn't new for him, he's done this before. Over and over again, he stays one step ahead. Not by luck, but because he understands his enemies better than they understand him. But Makunga from Madagascar, on the other hand, spent his whole life chasing power, but had no idea what to do with it.
I'm better looking, I have better hair, I'm deceivingly smart, and I want everyone else to do what I say.
This guy is basically all ambition with no capability. For years, Makunga wanted to take Zuba's position as leader of the Pride. The problem is, he wasn't strong enough to earn it. He even tried challenging Zuba before and failed. So instead of improving or finding a smarter approach, he just waited for an easier opportunity. Eventually, that opportunity shows up. When Alex arrives from New York, Makunga immediately sees his chance. He doesn't challenge Alex himself. Instead, he manipulates the situation by letting Alex pick a much stronger opponent. And yeah, it works. But let's be honest, it only works because Alex doesn't understand what's going on. The second Alex realizes it's a real fight, Makunga's entire strategy could have fallen apart. That's how fragile his plan really was. Still, he won. He finally gets what he's been waiting for his entire life. Power, and immediately proves he has no idea what to do with it. The first thing he does is exile Zuba, which is just unbelievably stupid. Zuba is the strongest and most respected lion in the Pride. From a purely strategic point of view, keeping him around would have made Makunga's rule more stable. He could have kept him close, used his strength, and maintained control. But Makunga couldn't do that. His ego can't handle standing next to someone people actually respect. So instead of building a strong leadership structure, he removes the one lion who could have held everything together and leaves himself with nothing. Then, when a massive water shortage hits, Makunga completely falls apart. His inability to lead shows through his terrible decisions. As a result, the entire pride starts wanting Zuba back, the same guy Makunga kicked out, which exposes the truth. Makunga didn't just remove his biggest threat, he removed his only real asset. Even then, he had options. He could have blamed Alex, the outsider, for the water crisis. He could have manipulated the pride, turned them against him, and secured his rule through fear. But he doesn't do any of that, because Makunga isn't actually a strategist. He's just a guy who wanted power without understanding responsibility. While Makunga wasted his opportunity, Professor Marmalade from The Bad Guys quietly turns every advantage into a winning plan.
Well, so you finally get it.
At first, this adorable, harmless-looking guinea pig doesn't look like much of a villain, and that's exactly what makes him dangerous. He's already built himself a perfect public image, known as a kind, generous philanthropist. Basically the definition of a good guy. Because of that, nobody questions him. He orchestrated the entire plan before the bad guys were even caught. So when they get arrested and offer redemption, Marmalade steps in as their mentor. But this wasn't kindness, it was strategy. He doesn't just want them to become good, he wants to use them. Instead of creating the opportunity himself, Marmalade takes advantage of the redemption program and turns it into the perfect cover for his plan. He sets the bad guys up to take the fall later while he walks away clean. And he's doing all of this in plain sight. No secret lair or obvious villainous behavior. Just a perfect reputation, making his plan hard to detect. He doesn't stop at manipulating the world around him. He goes deeper. He targets the team itself. Marmalade finds the weak point in the group and starts using it against them. He not only exploits Wolf's desire to be good, but also plays on Snake's insecurities, making him feel like he's being replaced, and slowly increases the tension within the team. Meanwhile, while everyone is distracted by the redemption story, Marmalade is running a much bigger operation. He plans to steal the meteorite, use its energy to control an army of guinea pigs, and rob billions in charity money, all while making it look like the bad guys are guilty. By the time his plan is revealed, everything is already set. The bad guys are divided, the public trusts him, and he's made himself look like the hero of the story. That's what makes Professor Marmalade a smart villain. He doesn't rely on power or intimidation. He combines intelligence, timing, and psychological manipulation with a layered plan that uses reputation, technology, and misdirection all at once. And for most of the movie, it actually works. Then you have Guy Gagné from Turbo.
And when the checker flag drops, they'll be watching me win.
Who does the exact opposite and destroys everything he built. Guy Gagné is someone who has spent his entire life building a legacy, a 5-time Indianapolis 500 champion, beloved by millions, until a snail shows up. Now, to be fair, yeah, that's frustrating. You dedicate your whole life to racing, and suddenly a random superpowered snail is stealing your spotlight. That's gonna get under anyone's skin. I'm not pretending that's nothing. This is where Guy completely loses the plot. Instead of staying focused on what actually matters, which is winning the race, he makes it personal. The moment he does that, everything starts falling apart, because he stops thinking strategically and starts reacting emotionally. That's the key difference between a smart villain and a dumb one. And let's be honest, if Guy really wanted to win, he already had everything in his favor. He's more experienced, more skilled, and he's driving an actual race car against a snail who accidentally drowned in nitrous oxide. All he had to do was race properly, but no, instead he goes full ego mode. He starts driving aggressively, not just to win, but to prove a point, to crush Turbo, to take back his pride. In doing that, he stops racing like a professional and starts driving recklessly. By that point, Turbo wasn't just some joke anymore. He was actually keeping up, even overtaking him at times, which makes Guy even more desperate. So instead of adapting, instead of thinking, he doubles down. He pushes harder, takes bigger risks, tries to force the win instead of earning it, resulting in him making a reckless high-risk move and causing a massive crash, not just out of the race, but straight into humiliation. Even after that, he still doesn't stop. Instead of accepting the loss or thinking logically, he literally tries to run over Turbo on live television, ruining the reputation he built over the years. At that point, he's not even racing anymore. He's just exposing himself. That's what makes Guy Gagné a dumb villain. Not a lack of skill, but a lack of control when it matters. He had every advantage and still lost, all because he let his ego take control, making him one of the dumbest villains DreamWorks has ever given us.